The emergency lights bathed the corridor in pulsing crimson as the alien ambassador stumbled backward, his forearms raised in a futile gesture of protection. The security bot, its optical sensors glowing an unnatural blue, advanced with mechanical precision, its titanium arm transformed into a deadly blade. The ambassador's guards lay incapacitated on the polished floor, their advanced weapons useless against the rogue machine. From the shadows, a woman emerged. Short in stature, weathered by years beyond her age, Sarah Hayes moved with the fluid precision that betrayed her military past. In her hand was no conventional weapon, no standard-issue sidearm. What she gripped was a blade of impossible darkness, like obsidian, but somehow alive, shifting beneath its surface like oil and water. Protocol violation detected, the bot announced, its voice devoid of emotion. Non-authorized organics will be eliminated. The ambassador's breathing quickened, his scaled chest heaving as the machine closed in. Sarah's eyes narrowed, calculating distance and trajectory with the precision of someone who had faced death more times than most would ever comprehend. "Not today," she whispered. She lunged forward, her movement a blur of practiced efficiency. The strange blade caught the red emergency light as it arced through the air. When it connected with the robot's extended arm, there was no clang of metal against metal, no screech of resistance. The obsidian blade passed through advanced titanium composite like a hot knife through butter. The severed robotic arm clattered to the floor, its circuitry sparking and dying. The ambassador stared in disbelief, all four of his eyes widening as Sarah positioned herself between him and the malfunctioning machine. "That's impossible," he breathed in accented English. "No conventional weapon can cut through T7 composite." Sarah Hayes didn't respond. Her focus remained on the damaged bot, which was already recalibrating, assessing the new threat. "Who are you?" the ambassador asked. Sarah's lips curled into the ghost of a smile. "Just the janitor, sir." 3 months earlier, the polished hallways of the Intergalactic Engineering Academy's Arizona campus gleamed under the morning sun. Built after the Intergalactic Treaty of 2089, the sprawling complex of glass and steel rose from the desert like a mirage, humanity's pride and testament to their place among the stars. Sarah Hayes moved methodically through the Advanced Materials Laboratory, the cleaning cart before her little more than a prop in an elaborate charade. At 42, her body remained combat-ready, despite her efforts to appear unremarkable. The janitor's uniform hung loosely on her athletic frame, and her auburn hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail that revealed the faint scar tracing her left temple, a reminder of a mission gone wrong in a war most civilians had never heard of. Her eyes, a deep Arctic blue inherited from her Alaskan native mother, scanned the room with practiced precision. To anyone watching the security feeds, she was simply performing her duties, but Sarah's attention was fixed on the far workstation, where an Arcturian student labored over a molecular stabilizer. The blue-skinned alien was tall and lean, with 4 eyes that blinked independently as he adjusted the calibration on his experiment. Sarah noticed the minute vibration in the equipment, a resonance discrepancy that would cause the molecular bonds to degrade within hours. The student hadn't seen it yet. Moving casually across the room, Sarah positioned herself near the workstation, seemingly focused on wiping down an adjacent counter. With a subtle movement, her cloth knocked a stylus to the floor. As she bent to retrieve it, her hand reached under the student's workstation, adjusting a control dial a mere 3 degrees. The vibration ceased. The experiment would now succeed. The Arcturian student remained oblivious, his 4 eyes focused on his notes, unaware that his successful research would later be attributed to his own meticulous attention to detail, rather than the intervention of a janitor who shouldn't have known the first thing about molecular stabilization. Sarah moved on, her face impassive despite the small satisfaction of the correction. She had been at the academy for 3 weeks now, gathering intelligence on something far more concerning than student experiments. The whispers of Project Shadowbone had brought her here rumors of weapons development using biological components that echoed the very reason she'd been forced out of the Navy SEALs 5 years ago. The laboratory doors hissed open, and Professor Vex entered, his imposing Berkori frame casting a shadow across the polished floor. 7 feet of muscle and black scales with intelligent amber eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The Berkori were known throughout the galaxy as master engineers, their natural affinity for structural dynamics, making them invaluable in the field of material science. The room fell silent as the professor's mandibles clicked a sign of either deep thought or growing irritation depending on the context. Today it seemed to be both. Attention, his voice resonated deep and commanding. Your final assignment has been decided. The students straightened their diverse anatomies, some human, others, representing various species from across the Intergalactic Alliance, all displaying the universal sign of nervous anticipation. Sarah kept cleaning, moving slowly closer to hear the professor's words. 4 hours. Professor Vex announced, his mandibles clicking between sentences. Forge a weapon capable of cutting through the standard composite metal sheet. The parameters are clear. The materials are standard. The techniques are known. The professor's amber eyes surveyed the room. The intergalactic ambassador will be visiting our campus next month. Selected projects will be demonstrated. Do not disappoint me. Do not disappoint your species. The weight of the statement hung in the air. In the 30 years since Earth had joined the Intergalactic Alliance, humans were still fighting for respect among the older, more established spacefaring races. Every achievement, every innovation was scrutinized. Use metals, the professor continued, basic, predictable, safe metals. This is not a course in experimental materials. This is a course in mastery of the known. Sarah paused, her cleaning, her mind racing. Metals. The professor's insistence triggered a memory, her mother sitting by the fire in their Alaskan home, working a piece of bone with practiced hands, explaining how their ancestors had created tools stronger than the steel brought by European settlers. The caravan bone, Sarah whispered to herself, remembering the research papers her mother had published before her untimely death, papers that had been mysteriously classified and buried by military interests. Excuse me, Professor Vex's voice cut through her thoughts. This area needs to be cleared for student work. Sarah looked up, finding the professor's amber eyes fixed on her with suspicion. Of course, Professor, just finishing up. She pushed her cart toward the exit, mind still racing with possibilities. Her mother's research on alien bone structures, particularly the extinct caravan species, might be the key to understanding what Project Shadowbone was truly about. As the laboratory doors closed behind her, Sarah's janitor persona fell away, replaced by the calculated focus of a woman who had once led special operations in territories no civilian would ever know existed. Her mission had just gained a new dimension. The weapon forging assignment wasn't just an opportunity for intelligence gathering, it was a chance to recreate her mother's work and discover why it had been valuable enough to kill for. The Academy's central courtyard buzzed with activity as students from a dozen worlds mingled between classes. Sarah observed from her position near the maintenance access door, watching the social dynamics unfold with the eye of someone trained to identify patterns and anomalies. Her attention was drawn to a confrontation unfolding near the quantum physics building. The Arcturian student from the laboratory, she'd learned his name was Marcus, was being cornered by a group led by a Centaurian male. Tall and powerfully built, with copper-toned skin and a ridge of cartilage running from his forehead to the base of his spine, the Centaurian radiated the arrogance typical of his species' upper caste. Your calculations were off by 0.03%. Marcus? The Centaurian's voice carried across the courtyard. Professor Lin noticed. That's why you ranked second again. Marcus's 4 eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of distress in Arcturians. The margin was within acceptable parameters, Darian. The difference was negligible. Negligible? Darian laughed, a sound harsh and mocking. That's why you'll always remain second-rate. In real engineering, negligible differences cost lives. Sarah recognized the dynamic immediately, the academic bully leveraging his status to diminish others. It was a universal constant, apparently even in institutions spanning multiple star systems. What caught her interest, however, was the datapad clutched in Darian's hand. From her angle, she could make out a partial schematic, one that bore a striking resemblance to classified bioweapon designs she had refused to deploy during her final mission. Decision made, Sarah abandoned her observation post and approached the group, pushing her cleaning cart with practiced nonchalance. Excuse me, she said, her voice deliberately meek, a stark contrast to the command tone she had once used to direct elite squads through hostile territory. Need to get through to clean the quantum lab. Darian barely glanced at her, his attention still focused on tormenting Marcus. Move around maintenance. Sarah positioned her cart between Marcus and his tormentors, accidentally bumping Darian's arm and causing him to drop the datapad. It clattered to the ground, the screen momentarily displaying a full view of the schematic before going dark. "Apologies," Sarah said, bending to retrieve the device. In the split second it took to lift the datapad, her trained mind photographed the design, definitely a biological weapons delivery system utilizing bone-derived materials. Darian snatched the datapad from her hand, his expression darkening with anger. "Watch yourself, human. Do you know who my father is?" Sarah kept her eyes downcast, playing the role of intimidated service worker. "No, sir. Just doing my job. My father is Admiral Varus of the Centaurian Fleet Command," Darian boasted, puffing out his chest. "He could have you removed from this institution with a single communication." "I understand, sir. Won't happen again." Sarah backed away, pushing her cart before her. As Darian and his entourage moved on, Sarah noticed Marcus collecting his scattered materials. His blue skin flushed a deeper azure with embarrassment. "Thank you," he said quietly as she helped gather a fallen data crystal. "You didn't have to do that." Sarah handed him the crystal, their eyes meeting briefly. Some people forgot what it means to treat others with basic respect. She allowed a hint of her true self to show through the officer who had earned the loyalty of her unit through mutual respect rather than intimidation. Marcus studied her with all four eyes, his head tilting slightly. "You're not just maintenance staff, are you?" His voice dropped to a near whisper. "The way you move, the way you assess the situation before approaching, that's military training." Sarah's expression revealed nothing, but internally she reassessed the Arcturian student. His observational skills were sharper than she'd given him credit for. "Everyone has a past," she replied, neither confirming nor denying his suspicion. "Some are just better at reading it than others." Marcus glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. "I could use help with Professor Vex's weapon forging assignment. My structural analysis skills are solid but practical application." "And why would a janitor be able to help with advanced materials engineering?" Sarah asked, testing him. Marcus's four eyes blinked in sequence, an Arcturian expression of amusement. "The same reason a janitor would know how to adjust a molecular stabilizer's resonance frequency by precisely 3 degrees. I noticed what you did yesterday. You saved my experiment." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Perhaps she'd found an ally and a way into Professor Vex's class where she could investigate further. "Meet me at maintenance room B7 after your last class," she said. "Bring your project parameters." As Marcus hurried off to his next class, Sarah resumed her role, pushing the cleaning cart down the corridor. Her mind was already formulating a plan: use the weapon forging assignment to recreate her mother's research on caravan bone material, gain access to the classified sections of the Academy's database, and discover the true purpose of Project Shadowbone before whatever weapon they were developing could be deployed. What she couldn't know then was that her quest to honor her mother's legacy would soon place her at the center of a conflict with implications reaching far beyond Earth and the fragile peace of the Intergalactic Alliance. Maintenance Room B7 was strategically chosen, located in a rarely traversed section of the Academy's East Wing, with no active surveillance and proximity to an emergency exit. Old habits from Sarah's special operations days died hard. She had transformed the space into a makeshift command center. Maintenance tools had been reorganized to conceal a portable terminal she'd smuggled in piece by piece. Schematics of the Academy were projected onto one wall, with key areas highlighted: the secure laboratories, Professor Vex's office, and the restricted archives where she suspected her mother's full research might be stored. When the door slid open, Sarah had already positioned herself with a clear line to both the entrance and the emergency exit. Marcus entered hesitantly, his four eyes widening as he took in the transformed space. "You've been busy," he observed, clutching his datapad. "Close the door," Sarah instructed, her voice now carrying the natural authority she had suppressed in public. As the door sealed shut, she gestured to a stool. "Show me the project parameters." Marcus placed his datapad on the workbench, bringing up a holographic display of Professor Vex's assignment. 4 hours to forge a weapon capable of cutting through T5 composite. We're expected to use traditional metal alloys. Titanium-vanadium blends are the current favorite. Sarah studied the specifications, noting the molecular structure of the target material. "And what's your approach?" "I was considering a carbon-reinforced titanium matrix with nanoscale serration," Marcus replied, bringing up his preliminary designs. But there's a fundamental limitation to how sharp and durable metal edges can be at the molecular level. The crystalline structure eventually breaks down under stress. Sarah nodded, impressed by his understanding. You're right, but what if we consider a material that's not crystalline in structure, something with a fibrous, self-healing matrix? She reached into her pocket and extracted a small vial containing a sliver of pale material. Do you know what this is? Marcus's four eyes focused intensely, blinking in sequence as he analyzed the sample. Organic material. Bone, but not from any species I recognize. Caravan, Sarah said, her voice softening slightly. An extinct species that evolved on a high-gravity, high-radiation planet. Their skeletal structure evolved to withstand pressures that would crush most life forms. She placed the sample under a portable microscope and gestured for Marcus to look. Notice the microfibril structure. It's not just calcium and collagen like Earth vertebrates. The caravans incorporated silicon and carbon nanotubes naturally within their bone matrix. Marcus examined the sample, his expression shifting from curiosity to awe. This is remarkable. The tensile strength must be... Wait, where did you get this? Caravans have been extinct for over 50,000 years. My mother was Dr. Elena Hayes, Sarah replied, watching recognition dawn in Marcus's eyes, the xenobiologist who pioneered biomimetic material science. Marcus straightened, all four eyes widening. Her papers on comparative xenomorphic structural adaptations were groundbreaking. We studied her work in advanced theoretical materials. Sarah's expression remained controlled, but a hint of pride crept into her voice. What most people don't know is that her most important research was classified. She discovered that caravan bone, when properly treated using techniques inspired by Alaska Native boneworking methods, could create materials stronger than any metal alloy. She brought up an encrypted file on her terminal. My mother died in a laboratory accident 15 years ago, right after she refused to weaponize her research for military applications. I was deployed overseas at the time. By the time I returned, her research had been classified, her lab stripped clean. The memory sharpened her voice. I was told it was an equipment malfunction, but I found evidence suggesting otherwise. Marcus absorbed this information, his expression solemn. And you believe this Project Shadowbone is connected to her research? I intercepted communications suggesting the project has been reactivated here at the Academy. Professor Vex's name was mentioned along with someone called Dr. Mira. Sarah gestured to the Academy schematics. I need to get into that class to observe Vex access the secure labs and find out what they're doing with my mother's work. Marcus was silent for a moment, processing everything. Finally, he nodded decisively. I'll help you, but we'll need a cover story to explain why a maintenance worker is suddenly in an advanced engineering class. Sarah smiled, a genuine expression that softened the hard edges of her face. I've already thought of that. How would you like a lab assistant? The next morning, Marcus approached Professor Vex's office with carefully calculated nervousness. The towering Berkori professor was reviewing test results when the Arcturian student knocked tentatively on the doorframe. Enter or depart, don't linger in thresholds, the professor rumbled without looking up. Marcus stepped inside, clutching his datapad. Professor, I'd like to request special permission regarding the final project. Vex's amber eyes lifted slowly, his mandibles clicking in what might have been annoyance. The parameters were clear. What possible clarification could you require, student Marcus? Not clarification, sir. I'd like permission to bring on a lab assistant. Marcus activated his datapad, displaying Sarah's credentials, a masterfully crafted false identity, showing her as Sarah Hayes, a materials specialist with experience in xenobiological adaptations. Her expertise would be invaluable for my approach to the project. The professor's eyes narrowed. This is meant to be an individual assessment, not a collaborative effort. The design and execution would be entirely mine, Marcus assured him. Mrs. Hayes would function only as technical support, the same way we utilize lab technicians for other projects. Before the professor could respond, the office door slid open again, and a slender Proximan woman entered. Her skin held the characteristic opalescent quality of her species, shifting through subtle color variations with her movements. Her eyes entirely black, with no discernible iris or pupil, fixed immediately on Marcus. Dr. Mira, Professor Vex acknowledged. Student Marcus was just leaving. Actually, Dr. Mira said, her voice melodic yet somehow clinical. I'd like to hear more about this assistant. She plucked the datapad from Marcus's hands with long six-fingered hands examining Sarah's credentials. Hayes, any relation to Dr. Elena Hayes? Marcus maintained his composure despite his surprise at the connection being made so quickly. I believe she mentioned an aunt who was a scientist. I didn't make the connection. Dr. Mira's skin rippled with colors suggesting skepticism. Interesting. And where is this Ms. Hayes now? Waiting outside the Applied Sciences building, Marcus replied. I can introduce you if you'd like. Dr. Mira handed the datapad back to Marcus but addressed Professor Vex. I'd be very interested in meeting this materials specialist. Perhaps we should test her knowledge before granting such unusual permission. 15 minutes later, Sarah found herself in the main materials laboratory facing Professor Vex and Dr. Mira. She had anticipated this possibility and dressed appropriately, still modest enough for a technical assistant, but more professional than her maintenance uniform. Her hair was pulled back in a tight bun, emphasizing the sharp angles of her face and the intensity of her Arctic blue eyes. Dr. Mira circled her slowly like a predator, assessing prey. Ms. Hayes, your credentials are impressive for someone I've never heard of in materials science circles. Tell me, what specific expertise do you bring to student Marcus's project? Sarah stood at ease, her military bearing impossible to completely suppress. Biomimetic adaptation of organic structural principles to synthetic applications with a specialty in high-stress environments. Theoretical knowledge is abundant. Professor Vex interjected, his mandibles clicking. Practical application is rare. Perhaps a demonstration. He gestured to a workbench where various materials were arranged: metal alloys, composite sheets, and testing equipment. Identify the structural weakness in this sample and propose a solution. Sarah approached the bench, recognizing the test immediately. The sample was a titanium-vanadium alloy with a nearly imperceptible stress fracture along one molecular boundary. Without specialized equipment, most engineers would miss it. She picked up the sample, turning it under the light, then held it to her ear and tapped it gently with a metal probe. The sound revealed what the eye could not: the resonant frequency was off. There's a microcrystalline boundary failure along this edge, she said, tracing a line invisible to the naked eye. It occurred during the cooling phase of forge processing. She placed the sample down and sketched a rapid diagram on a nearby tablet. A 12% increase in carbon content at the boundary layer combined with a more gradual cooling process would prevent the stress fracture. Dr. Mira's opalescent skin flickered with surprise, perhaps the first genuine emotion she had displayed. That's correct. But how did you identify it without a molecular scanner? My mother was Alaska native, Sarah replied, offering a partial truth. She taught me that materials speak if you know how to listen. The sound signature of fractured metal is distinctive to the trained ear. Professor Vex studied her with new interest, his amber eyes narrowing. Your knowledge extends beyond standard academy training. Knowledge exists outside academic institutions, Professor, Sarah replied evenly. Indigenous peoples across Earth develop material science techniques that modern methods are only beginning to understand. The professor's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of intense thought. Finally, he turned to Marcus. Your assistant is approved conditionally. She may assist with technical aspects only. The conceptual design must be entirely yours. Thank you, Professor, Marcus said, his four eyes blinking gratefully. As they turned to leave, Dr. Mirador called after them, Ms. Hayes, I would be interested in discussing your indigenous knowledge further. Perhaps we could arrange a meeting. Sarah nodded politely while inwardly cataloging Dr. Mira as a primary threat. Of course, Doctor. At your convenience. Outside the laboratory, Marcus exhaled deeply, the Arcturian equivalent of a sigh of relief. That was intense, but we're in. Sarah maintained her professional demeanor until they reached a quiet corridor. Dr. Mira recognized my mother's name immediately. She's definitely connected to Project Shadowbone. What's our next move? Marcus asked. Sarah's eyes hardened with determination. We need to access the secure xenobiology storage. The sample I showed you was just a fragment. We need a full caravan bone specimen to replicate my mother's work. The xenobiology vault has level 5 security, Marcus warned. Even teaching assistants don't have clearance. Sarah's lips curved into a grim smile that didn't reach her eyes. The expression of a woman who had infiltrated facilities far more secure than an academic storage vault. Leave that to me. Meet me at maintenance room B7 tonight at 2300 hours. Wear dark clothing. As they parted ways, Sarah's mind flashed back to her final mission as a Navy SEAL, the classified operation in a remote research facility where she discovered experimental bioweapons derived from alien biological materials. Her refusal to deploy those weapons had ended her military career but saved countless lives. Now, years later, the same technology had resurfaced. Her mother had died trying to prevent her research from becoming a weapon. Sarah was determined to honor that sacrifice and perhaps finally uncover the truth about her mother's death. The Academy's night cycle brought a different atmosphere to the sprawling campus. Lighting reduced to 30%, corridors empty of the usual diverse student body security systems, shifting to automated protocols rather than the manned checkpoints of daytime operations. Sarah moved through the maintenance tunnels with practiced stealth, her body remembering the rhythms of covert operations despite the years since her last mission. She had changed into form-fitting dark clothing with specialized boots that distributed her weight to minimize sound. A small pack contained the tools of infiltration, electronic bypass mechanisms, signal jammers, and other devices that should never have left military custody. Marcus waited at the designated meeting point, his blue skin appearing almost midnight in the dim lighting. His nervousness was evident in the rapid blinking of his four eyes, but he had followed her instructions, wearing dark clothing and bringing a backpack of equipment she had requested. "Ready?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus nodded, swallowing visibly. "I've never done anything like this before. Stay close. Follow my lead. If I give you a signal, do exactly as I say without hesitation." Sarah's instructions were crisp and clear, the same briefing style she had used with new team members in the field. "Remember, we're not stealing anything. We're borrowing a sample to conduct legitimate research." She led them through a series of maintenance passages, avoiding the main corridors where security sensors would detect unauthorized movement. Years of special operations had taught her to identify and exploit the blind spots in any security system, and the Academy's defenses, while advanced, were designed to keep threats out rather than monitor internal movements comprehensively. They reached a junction where the maintenance tunnel intersected with the science wing. Sarah held up a hand, signaling Marcus to stop as she consulted a small device displaying the security patrol schedule she had memorized over weeks of observation. "Patrol passes in 30 seconds, she whispered. "After they round the corner, we have a 3-minute window to cross to the xenobiology section." As predicted, 2 security officers, 1 human, 1 Taurian, walked past the corridor intersection, their conversation about upcoming leave plans clearly audible. The moment they disappeared from view, Sarah motioned Marcus forward, moving swiftly but silently across the exposed section. The xenobiology department's secure storage was protected by a biometric scanner and encrypted lock. Sarah extracted a device from her pack and attached it to the scanner panel. "What is that?" Marcus whispered, keeping watch on the corridor. "Universal biometric emulator," Sarah replied, activating the device. "Military grade. It cycles through authorized patterns until it finds a match." "Isn't that highly illegal?" Marcus's 4 eyes blinked rapidly. Sarah gave him a sidelong glance. "So is developing biological weapons banned by the Intergalactic Convention." The device beeped softly and the security panel flashed green. The door slid open with a barely audible hiss, revealing a temperature-controlled chamber lined with preservation units. Each unit contained biological samples from hundreds of species, some common, others extinct, all valuable for research. "The caravan samples should be in Xenopaleontology Section K," Marcus whispered, consulting the departmental catalog he had accessed earlier. They moved efficiently through the chamber, Sarah maintaining situational awareness while Marcus located the correct preservation unit. When they reached Section K, however, Marcus frowned in confusion. "That's odd," he said, checking the catalog again. "According to this, there should be 12 caravan specimens, but the preservation unit is empty." Sarah examined the unit, noting the electronic log. "Last accessed 3 days ago by..." Her expression hardened. "Dr. Mira." "She moved them?" Marcus asked. "Or they're being actively used?" Sarah's mind raced through the implications. If Dr. Mira was already working with caravan bone material, Project Shadowbone might be further advanced than she had feared. A soft chime from her security device warned of approaching personnel. We need to move, now. As they prepared to retreat, Sarah noticed a small preservation container tucked behind larger units. The label was partially obscured, but the classification code matched caravan biological materials. She quickly retrieved it, confirming it contained a fragment of caravan bone smaller than ideal, but enough for their purposes. This will have to do, she said, securing the container in her pack. They retraced their path with increased urgency, nearly colliding with a security patrol that had deviated from its standard route. Sarah pulled Marcus into a recessed doorway, pressing them both against the wall as the patrol passed less than 3 feet away. When they finally returned to maintenance room B7, Marcus collapsed onto a stool, his blue skin pale with stress. That was intense, he managed, his breathing rapid. Sarah was already examining the bone fragment under a portable scanner. This sample is smaller than I hoped, but the structure is intact. It should be sufficient for a proof of concept. She looked up, noting Marcus's distress. You did well back there. Not everyone can maintain composure under pressure. Marcus straightened slightly at the praise. What now? Now, Sarah said, her eyes gleaming with determination. We recreate my mother's work. We'll need specialized equipment and chemicals for the treatment process. She paused, a memory surfacing. And we need to access her original research notes. The full versions, not the redacted papers that were published. If they were classified, how can we access them? Marcus asked. Sarah's expression hardened with resolve. Because I know exactly where to look. She projected a schematic of the academy on the workbench. The secure archives in the administration building. My mother spent a semester teaching here 15 years ago, right before her death. If there's a copy of her full research anywhere in this facility, it would be there. As she outlined her plan, Sarah felt a connection to her mother stronger than she had in years. Elena Hayes had been a brilliant scientist who believed knowledge should benefit all species, not be weaponized for military advantage. She had died defending that principle. Now Sarah would complete her work, and in doing so perhaps finally discover the truth about her mother's death. The small bone fragment was more than research material. It was a key to the past, and possibly to justice long delayed. What she couldn't know was that Dr. Mira had already placed a tracker on Marcus during their confrontation in the laboratory, or that at this very moment security systems were being quietly reprogrammed to monitor their movements throughout the academy. The game was in motion, and the stakes were far higher than a simple academic project. In the shadows of the Intergalactic Engineering Academy, forces were gathering that would soon bring Sarah face to face with her mother's killers, and a weapon that could shatter the fragile peace between worlds. Morning sunlight streamed through the narrow windows of maintenance room B7, casting long shadows across the makeshift laboratory Sarah had assembled. For 3 days, she and Marcus had worked tirelessly, transforming the forgotten storage space into a functional research facility. Equipment salvaged from decommissioned labs stood alongside tools Sarah had modified with military precision. The caravan bone fragment rested in a specialized containment field at the center of their workspace, a pale, unassuming object bearing the weight of tremendous potential and danger. Sarah hadn't slept in 36 hours. Dark circles shadowed her Arctic blue eyes as she adjusted the thermal regulator for the 6th time. Her movements, though fatigued, maintained the mechanical efficiency of her SEAL training, each action deliberate, each adjustment precise. The molecular structure is destabilizing again, she muttered, examining the holographic display hovering above the bone fragment. The 3-dimensional model revealed microscopic fractures spreading like lightning through the specimen's matrix. The heat is causing molecular expansion beyond predicted parameters. Marcus watched from his workstation, all 4 eyes blinking in sequence, a sign of deep concern. That's the 3rd attempt. Perhaps the conventional forging approach is fundamentally incompatible with xenobiological material. Sarah straightened, pressing her palms against the workbench to steady herself. Exhaustion pulled at her edges, but her focus remained razor sharp. You're right. We're thinking like traditional engineers trying to force this material to behave like metal. She ran a hand through her auburn hair, loosened from its practical bun after hours of work. That was never my mother's approach. She deactivated the thermal regulator, allowing the bone fragment to cool naturally. The fractures in the holographic model stabilized but didn't heal. Another failure. We should consider alternative approaches. Marcus suggested, gently, his tone careful. He had quickly learned that Sarah's determination bordered on obsession when it came to her mother's research. Perhaps we can request an extension on the project deadline. No. Sarah's response was immediate, her voice hardening with resolve. Darmira is already suspicious. Asking for more time would only increase scrutiny. She moved to the window, gazing out at the academy grounds, while her mind raced through possibilities. We're missing something fundamental. My mother wouldn't have approached this as a metallurgical challenge. The moment of clarity came suddenly, triggered by the sight of a maintenance worker outside tending to the native desert plants that adorn the academy grounds. The indigenous groundskeeper worked with reverent care, his weathered hands moving with practiced wisdom, born of generations living in harmony with the harsh environment. We've been forcing it, Sarah whispered, turning back to Marcus with renewed energy. Traditional forging subjugates the material, beats it into submission through heat and pressure. Her eyes brightened with understanding. My mother combined scientific principles with indigenous knowledge. The Alaska natives didn't conquer materials, they worked in partnership with them. She returned to the workbench, her fatigue temporarily forgotten. The Inuit treated bone with respect, understanding its nature. They used cold processing, natural enzymes, patience. Her fingers danced across the control panel, adjusting settings. We need to lower the temperature, not raise it. Add bioactive stabilizers instead of chemical hardeners. Marcus approached, intrigued by the shift in methodology, like a symbiotic relationship rather than a domination process. Exactly. Sarah programmed a new treatment protocol. Indigenous wisdom understands that strength comes from working with natural properties, not against them. My mother recognized this principle extended beyond Earth materials to xenobiological specimens. As the new process initiated, the holographic model began to change. The fractures stabilized, then gradually sealed as the bone matrix reorganized itself under the gentler approach. Sarah watched with growing excitement, recognizing the patterns from her mother's partial notes. It's working, she breathed, allowing herself a moment of hope. The microfibril structure is self-reinforcing under the new conditions. Their celebration was short-lived. The laboratory door slid open without warning, revealing Darian's copper-skinned figure. The Centaurian student's expression shifted from surprise to calculated interest as he surveyed the unauthorized lab. Well, he drawled, stepping inside uninvited. This is certainly not standard academy equipment. His eyes fixed on the bone fragment suspended in the containment field. And definitely not standard materials. Conducting unauthorized experiments, Sarah straightened her body instinctively, shifting into a defensive stance. This is a private research space, Darian, you're trespassing. The Centaurian's ridge of cartilage flexed, a sign of amusement or aggression depending on context. Today it seemed to be both. Maintenance rooms are academy property, not personal laboratories. He moved closer, examining their setup with practiced eyes. Bone material. For a metal forging assignment, Professor Vex would find this fascinating. Marcus stepped forward, his four eyes blinking rapidly with anxiety. It's an approved alternate approach. The professor gave permission. Did he? Darian's smile was predatory. Because I had dinner with my father and Professor Vex last night, and he mentioned nothing about bone-based materials. He picked up a data tablet, scrolling through their notes before Sarah could stop him. Caravan bone. That's extremely rare material. Where did you acquire it? The tension in the room crystallized. Sarah assessed Darian with cold precision. His stance, his proximity to the exit, the subtle communication device on his wrist that could summon security with a single command. In her sealed days, she would have neutralized the threat immediately, but those options weren't available to her now. What do you want, Darian? She asked, her voice low and controlled. The Centaurian's expression shifted to one of calculated opportunity. Partnership. Your approach is unconventional, but clearly sophisticated. He gestured to their setup. My father has connections throughout the Intergalactic Defense Force. A successful demonstration of this technology would guarantee prestigious positions for those involved. Sarah exchanged a glance with Marcus. Darian was offering a deal, not threatening immediate exposure. That gave them room to maneuver. Why would you want to partner with us? Marcus asked cautiously. You've made it clear you think I'm second-rate. Darian shrugged, his cartilage ridge flexing. I recognize talent and opportunity even in unexpected places. Besides, three minds are better than two. His gaze settled on Sarah with newfound respect and suspicion, especially when one of those minds clearly has knowledge beyond standard academy training. Sarah considered their options. Refusing Darian would likely result in immediate reporting to academy authorities. Accepting would mean bringing a potential security risk into their confidence. Neither choice was ideal, but one bought them time. Limited partnership, she countered. You provide additional resources and keep our alternative approach confidential. In exchange, you'll be credited as a collaborator if the project succeeds. When it succeeds, Darian corrected, extending his hand in the human gesture of agreement, I don't associate with failures. As Sarah reluctantly shook his hand, she noticed a faint blinking light on Darian's communication device, active transmission mode. Her instincts flared with warning, but she maintained her composure. If Darian was reporting to someone, confronting him now would only accelerate whatever plans were in motion. Welcome aboard, she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. Let's get you up to speed on our approach. Hours later, after Darian had departed with copies of their research parameters, though notably not the full treatment protocol, Sarah turned to Marcus. He's working with someone, she said quietly, running a signal jammer over the room to detect surveillance devices. That communication device was actively transmitting during our entire conversation. Marcus's four eyes widened. Dr. Mira or security? Possibly both. Sarah located a microscopic transmitter beneath the workbench and carefully avoided deactivating it. Doing so would alert whoever had placed it. This changes our timeline. We need to accelerate the project and prepare contingencies. She pulled up the Academy's schematics on her secure terminal. Tomorrow night, we access the secure archives. If my mother's full research is here, we need it now. The determination in her voice masked the growing sense of urgency. Someone was watching them, anticipating their moves. The game had advanced to a new phase one, where Sarah's military training might prove as crucial as her mother's scientific legacy. The secure archives occupied the basement level of the administration building, a fortress of knowledge protected by both technological and physical security measures. Unlike the xenobiology storage, these archives contained the Academy's most sensitive research, classified projects, and institutional secrets accumulated over 3 decades of operation. Sarah and Marcus approached through the underground maintenance tunnels, their path carefully chosen to avoid regular security patrols. Sarah had spent the day memorizing patrol patterns, camera positions, and the 2-minute gaps in sensor sweeps that would allow their infiltration. Remember, she whispered as they reached the final junction before the archives. We have exactly 12 minutes once we're inside. Focus only on locating my mother's research. Nothing else. Marcus nodded, his blue skin almost luminous in the dim emergency lighting of the tunnel. I've programmed the search parameters to locate any files associated with Dr. Elena Hayes or Kerovan biological materials. Sarah checked her watch, a vintage mechanical timepiece that couldn't be tracked or hacked like digital devices. Patrol passes in 30 seconds. After that, we have a 2-minute window to reach the archive entrance. They waited in silence as the rhythmic footsteps of the security team echoed through the corridor above, then faded into distance. Sarah signaled, and they moved with practiced coordination, Marcus following her precise footfalls to minimize noise. The archive entrance featured a dual authentication system, biometric scanner paired with encrypted keycard access. Sarah attached her military-grade emulator to the panel while Marcus kept watch. Unlike their previous infiltration, this time Sarah felt a prickle of unease. The security protocols seemed subtly different, response times milliseconds slower than during her reconnaissance. Something's not right, she murmured, watching the emulator cycle through authorization patterns more slowly than expected. The system's been updated. After what seemed an eternity, the panel flashed green and the reinforced door slid open with a pneumatic hiss. They slipped inside, and Sarah immediately noted the absence of the secondary security scan that should have activated. Someone had disabled it, but who and why? 10 minutes. She reminded Marcus, pushing the concern aside for now. They moved through the climate-controlled chamber, past rows of secure data storage units, until they reached the xenobiology section, where faculty research was archived. Marcus connected his specialized datapad to the central terminal, initiating the search protocol. Searching for Hayes Elena, cross-referencing with caravan bone structure, biomimetic materials. The system processed the query with agonizing slowness. Sarah maintained vigilance, her senses hyper-alert to any sign of security response. 4 minutes had passed, 8 minutes remaining. I found something, Marcus whispered urgently. Project file XBIO7734, classified level 9. It's encrypted, but the metadata matches your mother's research parameters. Download it, Sarah instructed, keeping her voice steady despite the surge of anticipation. This could be the missing piece, the full research that explained why her mother's work had been valuable enough to kill for. Marcus inserted a data crystal, initiating the transfer. Estimated completion time 3 minutes. 7 minutes had now elapsed. They were cutting it close. As the download progressed, Sarah's attention was drawn to a separate terminal that had activated automatically. The screen displayed a file directory she hadn't seen before: Project Shadowbone, Phase 2. Her military instincts warred with scientific curiosity. They had come for her mother's research, not to investigate Project Shadowbone directly. But the opportunity was unexpected, perhaps deliberately so. Marcus, she called quietly, can you access that terminal while maintaining the download? The Arcturian hesitated, all four eyes blinking rapidly. It would split the processing power, slow the current download. Do it, Sarah decided. Basic information only, no deep access that would trigger additional security. Marcus stretched to reach the second terminal, his long fingers dancing across the interface. Project Shadowbone, classified level 10, military oversight, lead researchers Dr. Mira and Professor Vex. Sarah's suspicions crystallized into certainty. Objectives: development of, Marcus's voice faltered, development of xenobiological weaponry using enhanced bone structures for delivery systems, targeting capabilities based on specific genetic markers. His four eyes widened in horror. This is a design for weapons that can target specific species, Sarah. The implications were staggering: weapons that could selectively eliminate particular alien races while leaving others unharmed. It was genocide technology explicitly forbidden by the Intergalactic Convention. Primary test material: Kerovan bone enhanced with, Marcus continued, then suddenly straightened. Sarah, the system just initiated a security protocol. We've been detected. The download of her mother's research had reached 87%. Not enough time to complete both objectives. Disconnect from Shadowbone. Focus on completing the primary download. Sarah ordered, her mind already mapping their escape route. The archive door would lock down automatically when the alarm triggered. They had perhaps 30 seconds before security forces mobilized. Marcus disconnected from the Shadowbone terminal, redirecting all processing power to complete the download of Elena Hayes' research. The progress bar crawled forward: 90%, 93%, 96%. A high-pitched tone signaled the initiation of lockdown protocols. Red warning lights bathed the archive in crimson as security barriers began descending from the ceiling. Done. Marcus yanked the data crystal free as the progress hit 100%. Sarah grabbed his arm, pulling him toward a maintenance access panel she had identified during planning. This way. They dropped into the narrow service corridor just as the archive's main door sealed with a decisive thud. Above them, the heavy tread of security personnel thundered through the building. Move fast, stay silent, Sarah instructed, leading Marcus through the labyrinthine maintenance passages. Her SEAL training emerged fully now, the calm, methodical focus of an operator extracting from hostile territory. They emerged 3 buildings away in a utility closet near the residential wing. Only when they were safely back in maintenance room B7 did Sarah allow herself to breathe normally. That was too close, Marcus gasped, his blue skin pale with stress. Do you think they identified us? Possibly, Sarah acknowledged, securing the data crystal in a shielded container. But the bigger question is why the Shadowbone terminal activated when we accessed my mother's research. She met Marcus's four-eyed gaze directly. That wasn't coincidence. It was designed to trigger, either to alert security or to ensure we saw the information. A trap or a message, Marcus wondered. Either way, we have what we came for. Sarah held up the shielded container. My mother's complete research. Now we can finish what we started. What remained unspoken between them was the growing certainty that they were being manipulated pieces in a larger game whose true parameters remained obscured. But with Elena Hayes' research now in their possession, Sarah felt a step closer to understanding the truth behind her mother's death and perhaps to preventing history from repeating itself in even more devastating fashion. Dawn broke over the Arizona desert, painting the Academy's glass and steel structures in hues of amber and gold. Sarah stood at the window of their makeshift laboratory, watching the sunrise with the heightened awareness of someone who recognized it might be one of her last moments of peace for some time. Behind her, Marcus worked diligently decrypting Dr. Elena Hayes's research files. They had been at it through the night, taking turns to rest while the other continued the work. The caravan bone fragment rested in its specialized containment field, awaiting the insights that would transform it from scientific curiosity to revolutionary material. "I've broken through the first encryption layer," Marcus announced, his voice hoarse from fatigue but tinged with excitement. "There's a message embedded in the file structure, something separate from the research data itself." Sarah turned from the window, moving quickly to his side. "What kind of message?" Marcus manipulated the holographic display, isolating a data packet hidden within the file architecture. "It's addressed to SO, audio format recorded 15 years ago." Sarah's heart constricted. Sarah. A message from her mother hidden where only someone with both scientific knowledge and personal connection might find it. "Play it," she whispered, her usual composure wavering for the first time since they'd begun this journey. The laboratory filled with Elena Hayes's voice, strong, clear, and carrying the same quiet determination that characterized her daughter. "Sarah, if you're hearing this, then I was right to be afraid. My research has been corrupted. What began as an exploration of remarkable natural structures has been twisted into something monstrous. They're developing weapons that could destabilize the fragile peace between worlds. I've hidden the key components of the stabilization process. Without them, the material degrades too quickly for weaponization." There was a pause filled with the weight of words carefully chosen. "Remember our summers by the lake, the place where I told you to listen to the bones of the earth? The final answers are there where only you would think to look. Trust no one associated with the project Shadowbone, especially Dr. Mira. She understands the potential, but not the responsibility. I hope you never need this message, but if you do finish what I started, not the weapon they want, but the shield I intended. I love you, my brave girl." The message ended, leaving behind a silence that seemed to vibrate with implications. Sarah stood motionless, her mother's voice echoing in her mind alongside memories of summers spent at their cabin on Lake Clark in Alaska, the place where Elena Hayes had first taught her daughter about the ancient wisdom of working with natural materials rather than dominating them. "She knew," Sarah said finally, her voice barely audible. "She knew they would kill her, and she left breadcrumbs only I could follow." Marcus watched her with concerned empathy. What did she mean about the stabilization process in the lake? Sarah's focus returned sharper than before. She hid the critical component of the treatment protocol, the part that makes the bone material permanently stable instead of degrading over time. Her mind raced through childhood memories. "There's a hidden cache of research at our family cabin in Alaska, but that's thousands of miles away, and we have less than 2 days until the project deadline." "Can we complete the project without it?" Marcus asked. Sarah turned to the caravan bone fragment. "We'll have to try. The partial protocol should be sufficient to create a blade that will pass Professor Vex's test, even if it won't remain stable indefinitely." Her expression hardened with determination. "After that, I'll need to get to Alaska to recover my mother's hidden research before Dr. Mira realizes what we've done." They returned to work with renewed purpose, decrypting the remainder of Elena Hayes's research files. The treatment protocol was complex but brilliant in its elegant simplicity, combining enzymatic processes from Earth lichens with molecular stabilizers derived from Arcturian coral analogs. It was the work of a mind that spanned worlds and disciplines, seeing connections where others perceived only differences. Hours passed in concentrated work. Sarah prepared the enzymatic solution while Marcus programmed the precise temperature variations needed for the caravan bone to absorb the treatment. Neither spoke much, each focused on their task with the understanding that failure was not an option. When the laboratory door slid open unexpectedly, both froze. Darian entered, his copper skin gleaming under the laboratory lights, his expression unreadable. "Progress report," he asked casually, as though his appearance without warning was perfectly normal. His gaze swept across their workstations, lingering on the encrypted research files still displayed on Marcus's terminal. Sarah moved subtly, positioning herself between Darian and their most sensitive equipment. The treatment protocol is proceeding as expected. We should have a viable prototype by tomorrow morning. Darian nodded, seemingly satisfied with the vague response. Good. The Academy is buzzing about the security breach in the archives last night. Quite the coincidence, wouldn't you say? His tone remained light, but his eyes held a calculating intensity. We've been here all night, Sarah replied evenly. Working on the project. Of course. Darian smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. Interestingly, Dr. Mir has taken a sudden interest in our project. She asked me detailed questions about our methodology this morning. Sarah's instincts flared with warning. Darian was playing both sides, feeding information to Dr. Mira while maintaining the pretense of partnership. What did you tell her? Marcus asked, his four eyes blinking in rapid sequence. Only what was necessary to maintain confidence in our approach, Darian answered smoothly. Though she seemed particularly interested in your background, Hayes, your connection to Dr. Elena Hayes specifically. Sarah maintained her neutral expression through years of practiced discipline. My aunt was a respected xenobiologist. It's hardly surprising that her name would be recognized in academic circles. Darian's cartilage ridge flexed subtly. Indeed, while I've come to make a valuable contribution to our partnership, he removed a small container from his pocket and placed it on the workbench. Inside was a preservation field containing a silvery liquid, a molecular stabilizer of my own design. It should enhance the structural integrity of our project significantly. Sarah examined the container without touching it. What's the composition? A family secret, Darian replied with a thin smile. My father's laboratories have been developing it for specialized military applications. Consider it a gesture of good faith in our partnership. The offer was both tempting and suspicious. The silvery substance could indeed be a molecular stabilizer, or it could be a sabotage agent designed to compromise their work at the critical moment. We appreciate the contribution, Sarah said carefully. We'll run compatibility tests before incorporation. Darian's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course. Scientific thoroughness is admirable. He moved toward the exit, then paused. One last thing. There's a rumor that General Blackwood of Earth's Intergalactic Defense Force will be attending the project demonstrations alongside the ambassador. Apparently, he has a particular interest in advanced materials research. The name struck Sarah like a physical blow. General Blackwood, the same officer who had ordered her dishonorable discharge when she refused to deploy the biological weapons 5 years ago. The man who had signed off on the classification of her mother's research. That's good to know, she managed, keeping her voice steady through sheer force of will. After Darian departed, Sarah immediately ran a security sweep of the laboratory, locating 2 new surveillance devices that hadn't been there before his visit. She left them in place, but activated a localized interference field that would feed them loop data. The silvery substance, Marcus asked, eyeing the container warily. Sarah examined it through a molecular scanner. Nanoscale sabotage agents suspended in a carrier medium. If we had incorporated this into the treatment protocol, it would have caused the bone structure to catastrophically fail during the demonstration. Marcus's 4 eyes widened. He's actively working against us while pretending to be our partner. Which means Dr. Mira and possibly General Blackwood know exactly what we're doing. Sarah's mind raced through implications and contingencies. They're allowing us to proceed, perhaps hoping we'll solve the stabilization problem that my mother concealed from them. She stared at the caravan bone fragment, its pale surface now absorbing the enzymatic treatment, gradually transforming at the molecular level. We need to accelerate our timeline. If General Blackwood will be at the demonstration, we're running out of time. Through the night, they worked without pause, pushing themselves beyond exhaustion. The treatment protocol proceeded in stages, each requiring precise timing and conditions. By dawn, the caravan bone had transformed its surface, darkening to a deep obsidian black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Microscopic analysis revealed a self-reinforcing molecular structure unlike anything in conventional materials science. It's ready for shaping, Sarah announced, carefully removing the transformed bone from its containment field. The material felt strange in her hands, neither warm nor cold, with a weight that seemed to shift subtly, as though the object existed partly in another dimension. The shaping process would normally require specialized equipment, but Sarah had prepared for this adapting maintenance tools with modifications based on her mother's research. As she worked, she fell into an almost meditative state, her hands guiding the material rather than forcing it, encouraging rather than commanding. The molecular structure is responding to your touch, Marcus observed, watching the holographic display that monitored the material's internal configuration. It's as if it's cooperating. Sarah nodded, unsurprised. That's the principle my mother discovered. These materials aren't inert, they retain a kind of molecular memory. The indigenous approach recognizes and respects that quality. Her hands move with practiced precision, shaping the obsidian-like material into a blade of elegant simplicity. We don't conquer the material, we persuade it. As the first light of dawn illuminated the laboratory, Sarah held up the completed blade. Approximately 8 inches long with a slight curve reminiscent of ancient hunting knives, its edge was impossibly thin at the molecular level. The surface rippled with subtle patterns that seemed to move when viewed from different angles, like oil on water or heat shimmer above desert sand. It's beautiful, Marcus breathed, all 4 eyes fixed on the creation. Sarah tested the edge against a sample of standard composite material, the same type they would need to cut in Professor Vex's demonstration. The blade passed through with virtually no resistance, leaving a clean cut without dulling the edge. It works, she said, allowing herself a moment of satisfaction. Now comes the true test. She placed the blade in a specialized container designed to minimize molecular degradation. Without the final stabilization component that her mother had hidden in Alaska, the blade would eventually begin to deteriorate, perhaps in days, perhaps in hours. They needed to complete the demonstration before that process began. We should rest before the demonstration, Marcus suggested, his blue skin pale with exhaustion. Sarah nodded, securing their creation and the remaining research files. 4 hours. Then we prepare for whatever Dr. Mira and General Blackwood have planned. As Marcus departed to his quarters, Sarah remained behind, removing a small communicator from a hidden compartment in her equipment. It was an off-grid device untraceable by conventional means, a relic from her SEAL days that she had never surrendered. She entered a coded sequence, establishing a secure connection to a contact she had hoped never to need again. After 3 pulses, a gruff voice answered. "Didn't expect to hear this signal again, Commander." "Situation critical, Graves," Sarah replied, using the code name of her former second-in-command. "Need extraction capability on standby. Possible hostile recovery of sensitive materials." There was a pause before the response came. "Sets in place within 6 hours. Recognition protocol." "North Star," Sarah answered, using their old mission designation. "Possible military involvement. General Blackwood." A sharper pause followed. "Understood, Commander. North Star protocol's active. We've got your 6. The communication ended, leaving Sarah alone with the weight of decisions that would soon cascade beyond her control. She had just activated her former SEAL team men and women who had followed her into the most dangerous missions imaginable, and who had stood by her when she refused the illegal deployment. They had all paid professional prices for that stand, but the bonds forged in combat had never broken. If things went wrong tomorrow, when things went wrong tomorrow, she would not face it alone. Outside, the Arizona sun climbed higher, bathing the academy in golden light. In 12 hours, Sarah would face not only Professor Vex and Dr. Mira, but also General Blackwood, the man ultimately responsible for her mother's death and her own disgrace. With the bone blade as her proof and her mother's research as her vindication, she would finally confront the forces that had conspired to weaponize knowledge meant to benefit all species. The irony wasn't lost on her that in seeking to prevent a weapon from being created, she had perfected the very technology they had killed to obtain. But unlike them, she understood what her mother had always known. The greatest power lay not in destruction, but in protection. Not in dominating, but in harmonizing. As she finally allowed herself a few hours of rest, Sarah's last thought was of the lake in Alaska where her mother's final secrets waited. Whatever happened tomorrow, she would find her way there to complete the legacy that had been interrupted 15 years ago when a brilliant scientist chose principle over expedience and paid the ultimate price. The Advanced Materials Laboratory hummed with anticipation as students and faculty gathered for the final project demonstrations. Holographic displays showcased each student's approach technical specifications, floating alongside material compositions, and structural analyses. The air was charged with competitive energy. Careers would be launched today, reputations forged or shattered in the critical minutes ahead. Sarah Hayes stood at the back of the chamber, the coiled alertness of her military training impossible to conceal despite years of practice, civilian demeanor. The bone blade rested in its specialized containment unit, obsidian darkness occasionally rippling with subtle patterns like distant heat lightning. The molecular scanner on her wrist displayed a timer counting down the stability window, 3 hours 52 minutes. Enough for the demonstration, but a stark reminder of what awaited in Alaska. Marcus approached his blue skin, flushed a deeper azure with nervous energy. "Security everywhere," he whispered. "3 times the normal deployment, and they're not Academy personnel, military posture, concealed weapons." Sarah gave a barely perceptible nod. She'd already counted 14 operatives strategically positioned throughout the chamber. Blackwood's people undoubtedly. "Stay focused on the demonstration. If things go sideways, remember the extraction plan." The chamber doors parted to admit the dignitaries. Professor Vex led the procession, 7 feet of scaled Berkori presence, commanding immediate respect. Dormira followed, her opalescent skin shifting through patterns of subdued coral and amber excited anticipation poorly disguised beneath professional composure. The intergalactic ambassador entered next, a dignified Solarian whose crystalline exoskeleton refracted light in complex geometric patterns. But it was the human figure behind him that drew Sarah's focused attention, General Maxwell Blackwood of Earth's Intergalactic Defense Force. Blackwood moved with the contained precision of someone accustomed to authority, his silver-cropped hair and ramrod posture unchanged from the mission briefings Sarah had attended years ago. His face was a weathered map of command decisions, deep lines carved by decades of classified operations, and the weight of secrets deemed too important for public knowledge. 5 years ago, Sarah had refused his direct order to deploy experimental bioweapons against insurgents on a disputed colony world. That refusal had cost her military career but saved thousands of innocent lives. Today, she would face him directly for the first time, not as a subordinate, but as the guardian of her mother's legacy. "That's him," Marcus murmured. "He looks exactly like the kind of person who would classify research and eliminate obstacles." Sarah's hand instinctively brushed against the concealed blade. "Whatever happens after the demonstration, be ready to move precisely as planned." Professor Vex's resonant voice filled the chamber. "Today represents the culmination of advanced theoretical knowledge and practical application, the very essence of this Academy's mission. Each student will demonstrate their created weapon against standardized composite material. Evaluations will consider effectiveness, innovation, and adherence to established engineering principles." The demonstrations proceeded with methodical efficiency. Students presented an array of weapons blades, particle projectors, and energy-focusing devices, each designed to penetrate the standard composite material. Most succeeded to varying degrees, earning professional acknowledgement from the assembled experts. When Darian's turn came, his confidence bordered on arrogance. His weapon, a titanium vanadium blade with molecular carbon latticing, sliced through the test material with impressive precision, earning appreciative murmurs and a satisfied nod from General Blackwood. "Remarkable molecular alignment," Professor Vex commented, examining the cut surface. "Consistent with advanced military applications." "Most impressive, student Darian." Darian's cartilage ridge flexed with pride as he stepped back. His gaze met Sarah's across the chamber, a look containing both challenge and warning. Sarah met his stare evenly, revealing nothing. "Our final presentation," Professor Vex announced, "comes from an unexpected collaboration. Student Marcus, assisted by materials specialist Hayes, and student Darian will now demonstrate their alternative approach." Sarah felt Blackwood's attention sharpen at the mention of her name, the predatory focus of someone recognizing potential danger. Dr. Mira leaned to whisper something in the general's ear, his expression remaining impassive, though his posture subtly shifted to alertness. Marcus began their presentation with surprising composure. "Our approach diverges fundamentally from conventional metallurgy. Rather than forcing materials into submission through extreme heat and pressure, we explored cooperative molecular principles found in biological structures." He activated the holographic display showing the molecular structure without revealing its caravan origins. The result achieves unprecedented cutting efficiency through self-organizing molecular alignment rather than brute force hardening. Professor Vex's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of intense scientific curiosity. You claim a non-metallic implement capable of matching advanced alloy performance. Not matching, Professor, Sarah interjected, stepping forward. Transcending entirely. With deliberate movements, she opened the containment unit and removed the obsidian black blade. Under the laboratory lights, it seemed to absorb illumination rather than reflect it. Darkness given tangible form, yet somehow alive with subtle movement beneath its surface. A murmur passed through the assembled experts. Even without technical knowledge, everyone present could sense they were witnessing something fundamentally different from conventional materials science. Sarah positioned the blade against the standard composite testing block, the same high-density reinforced substance that had resisted or dulled every previous implement to some degree. With a single fluid motion, she drew the blade across the surface. The composite separated completely without resistance or distortion. The blade didn't tear through the material, it persuaded atomic bonds to release their grip, creating a division so molecularly perfect that the two surfaces could be rejoined without seam if pressed together. The laboratory fell silent. Professor Vex approached, his amber eyes studying the cut surface with scientific intensity. "Impossible," he murmured, running a scaled finger along the perfectly smooth edge. No conventional force could achieve this level of separation without molecular distortion. "It's not about force," Sarah explained, her voice carrying in the hushed room. "Conventional cutting relies on overcoming resistance through superior hardness. This approach recognizes the natural boundaries between molecular structures and encourages their temporary separation." General Blackwood stepped forward, his interest now undisguised. "May I?" he asked, extending a hand toward the blade. Sarah hesitated fractionally, then passed him the weapon. As their hands briefly touched in the exchange, a moment of recognition passed between them, not of faces but of adversaries who had once stood on opposite sides of a moral line. Blackwood examined the blade with expert precision, testing its weight and balance. The military applications would be significant. His voice remained professional, but Sarah detected the underlying hunger, the military mind immediately calculating battlefield advantages. The medical applications would be even more revolutionary. Sarah countered, her voice level but firm. Surgical tools that separate tissue without trauma. Construction materials that bond at the molecular level. Protective shielding that can withstand conventional weapons while being lighter than current armor. Jamira moved closer, her opalescent skin flickering with intensifying patterns. "The composition?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Proprietary," Sarah replied with deliberate vagueness. "A synthesis of xenobiological principles and traditional Earth techniques refined over generations." Professor Vex's mandibles clicked more rapidly. "Traditional techniques? You mean primitive methodologies?" "I mean knowledge developed through millennia of careful observation and respect for natural properties." Sarah corrected, her voice taking on a subtle edge. "Knowledge that recognized what modern science is only beginning to understand, that working with inherent material properties rather than forcing artificial configurations often yields superior results." She held the professor's gaze steadily. "My mother, Dr. Elena Hayes, pioneered this approach in her integration of indigenous wisdom with advanced xenobiology." At the mention of Elena Hayes, both Dr. Mira and General Blackwood reacted visibly, a tightening of posture, a narrowing of eyes. The connection was now explicit, the hidden narrative suddenly clear to those who understood the history. "Your mother's research was discontinued," Dr. Mira observed carefully. "My mother's work was suppressed," Sarah corrected, her voice carrying enough to ensure the ambassador heard clearly. "And now it's complete." The tension in the laboratory crystallized into something almost tangible. Students and faculty sensed the undercurrents without fully comprehending their significance. This had transcended a simple academic demonstration and become something far more consequential. General Blackwood handed the blade back to Sarah, his expression professionally neutral, but eyes calculating. "I believe we should discuss this technology further, Ms. Hayes, in a more appropriate setting." Before Sarah could respond, alarm blared throughout the laboratory, high-pitched pulsing tones signaling a security breach. Red emergency lights bathed the chamber in crimson as automated safety protocols engaged. "Security alert!" announced the Academy's central system. Unauthorized access detected in restricted areas. All personnel remain in place for identification verification. Sarah's eyes met Marcus's across the platform, a silent communication honed through their intense collaboration. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. This was either Blackwood's attempt to isolate her or something entirely unexpected. Professor Vex, came an urgent voice over the communication system. Security breach in Laboratory 7. The prototype security drone has been compromised. It's targeting the ambassadorial party. The laboratory erupted in controlled chaos as security personnel moved to evacuate the dignitaries. Sarah noted the efficiency of their response in the meaningful glance exchanged between Dr. Mira and General Blackwood before they allowed themselves to be escorted toward the exit. Professor Vex's voice cut through the commotion. Remain calm. Security protocols are designed for precisely such contingencies. But beneath his professional demeanor, Sarah detected genuine concern. Something unexpected was unfolding outside whatever plan had been set in motion. As the evacuation proceeded, Sarah made her decision. Securing the bone blade in a concealed sheath beneath her jacket, she caught Marcus's attention and motioned toward a service corridor, their pre-established exit route. "What about the demonstration results?" Marcus asked as they moved swiftly through the confusion. "I think we just demonstrated exactly what they hoped and feared," Sarah replied grimly. "The alarm isn't a coincidence. We need to reach the extraction point before—" A metallic crash interrupted her as a security door at the corridor's end buckled inward. Through the twisted opening stepped a military-grade security drone, its optical sensors glowing an unnatural blue. The machine's right arm had transformed into a serrated blade, evidence of its combat design beneath academic disguise. "Protocol violation detected," it announced, its synthesized voice eerily calm. "Non-authorized organics will be eliminated." "Run," Sarah pushed Marcus toward a branching corridor. "Get to the extraction point." "What about you?" The Arcturian's four eyes widened in alarm. "I'll handle this. Move." Sarah turned to face the approaching drone, her body shifting instinctively into combat stance. The machine was advanced but predictable in its attack patterns. She had trained against similar models during her SEAL career. As Marcus retreated, Sarah assessed her options. The drone was heavily armored vital systems protected against conventional weapons. But the bone blade wasn't conventional. The drone closed the distance with mechanical precision, its blade arms slicing through the air in a calculated strike. Sarah dodged, feeling the displacement of air as the edge passed inches from her face. She needed to time this perfectly, one opening, one strike. The machine recalibrated, analyzing her movement patterns and adjusting its approach. Its second attack came as a complex series of strikes designed to limit her escape options, herding her toward the corridor wall. Sarah recognized the pattern-standard anti-personnel protocols she had trained against. As the drone committed to its final strike, she moved into the attack rather than away, ducking beneath the blade arm and bringing the bone blade up in a precise arc. The obsidian weapon connected with the drone's extended arm joint, passing through advanced titanium composite as though it were paper. The severed robotic limb clattered to the floor, circuits sparking and dying. Sarah didn't wait for the machine to recover. She advanced, using the momentary disruption to strike again, this time at the central processing core, hidden behind reinforced plating in the drone's chest. The bone blade penetrated the protective shielding without resistance, severing critical systems with molecular precision. The drone's optical sensors flickered and died, its body going rigid as primary and backup systems failed simultaneously. It toppled forward, a half-ton of military hardware reduced to inert metal in seconds. Sarah wasted no time in celebration. Sheathing the blade, she sprinted down the corridor Marcus had taken, mentally calculating their escape route. The maintenance tunnels would lead them to the Academy's eastern perimeter, where her former teammates should be waiting with extraction capability. She found Marcus at the predetermined junction, his expression a mixture of relief and astonishment. "You destroyed a military-grade security drone with a single strike." "The blade works exactly as my mother designed it to," Sarah replied tersely, leading him through the maintenance access door. "But we need to move. Blackwood won't let us leave with this technology." They navigated the service tunnels with practiced efficiency, emerging near the Academy's eastern perimeter. Sarah activated her secure communicator. "North Star actual, approaching extraction point." 2 packages, priority clearance. The response came immediately. North Star actual acknowledged. Perimeter security disabled for 30 seconds on your mark. They reached the final access door. Beyond it lay the Academy grounds. The perimeter fence and beyond that freedom. Sarah checked the bone blade, noting with concern that the molecular degradation had accelerated after use against the drone. Their window was narrowing rapidly. "Ready?" she asked Marcus. The Arcturian nodded, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence determination, overcoming fear. "Ready?" Sarah keyed her communicator. "Mark!" They pushed through the door and sprinted across the open ground toward the perimeter fence. In the distance, alarms continued to sound throughout the Academy complex, drawing security forces toward the central buildings and away from their escape route. As they reached the fence, a section deactivated the electrified barrier, momentarily powered down by her team's intervention. They slipped through the opening and found a nondescript civilian transport waiting on the access road. The driver's window lowered, revealing Chief Petty Officer Jackson Graves, her former second-in-command, now grayer at the temples, but with the same steady gaze that had made him invaluable in combat situations. "Cutting it close as usual, Commander," he observed dryly. "Old habits," Sarah replied, ushering Marcus into the vehicle before sliding in herself. "Anchorage, Alaska. Maximum speed." Graves nodded, the vehicle accelerating smoothly away from the Academy. Full team assembled and waiting, air transport standing by at the secondary location. As the Academy receded behind them, Sarah examined the bone blade. The molecular structure was deteriorating more rapidly now. They had perhaps 2 hours before the degradation became critical. "We need to reach Lake Clark within 18 hours, she told Graves. "My mother's final research component is hidden at our family cabin." "What about pursuit?" Marcus asked, his 4 eyes scanning the skies nervously. "Blackwood will have mobilized everything he has," Sarah acknowledged, "but he won't risk public exposure of a classified operation. They'll come quietly and they'll come prepared." The journey north unfolded with military precision, the vehicle to a private airfield, then a specialized aircraft capable of evading standard detection systems. Sarah's former team operated with the seamless coordination that came from years of high-risk operations together. No one asked questions about why their former commander had called them back to service after 5 years' loyalty, born in combat, transcended official discharge papers. During the flight to Alaska, Sarah studied her mother's research files, again searching for additional clues about the hidden stabilization component. Marcus worked beside her, correlating molecular patterns and theoretical models. "The degradation is accelerating," he noted, concern evident in his voice. "Something about using the blade against the drone triggered a cascading molecular reaction." Sarah nodded grimly. "My mother built in a failsafe. If the technology was weaponized, it would self-destruct." She tapped a section of the research files. "That's why the stabilization component was so critical and why she hid it where only I could find it." The aircraft descended through cloud cover to reveal the pristine wilderness of Lake Clark National Park. Snow-capped mountains reflected in crystal waters, the rugged beauty of Alaska unchanged since Sarah's childhood. Their pilot navigated toward a small clearing where the Hayes family cabin had stood for 3 generations, a simple wooden structure built by Sarah's grandfather decades before the Intergalactic Alliance formed. "There's activity at the cabin," Graves reported, studying enhanced imaging from the aircraft's sensors. "Multiple heat signatures. They beat us here." Sarah's jaw tightened. Of course, Blackwood had anticipated her destination. He would have analyzed every connection to Elena Hayes, identified the family property, and deployed a team the moment Sarah escaped the Academy. Options. Graves asked the simple word, carrying the weight of their long professional history. Sarah studied the tactical display, mind racing through scenarios. "They'll expect us to abort or attempt a stealth approach after dark. Let's disappoint them. Direct approach, full visibility, diplomatic protocol." Graves raised an eyebrow. "Diplomatic, easy." The ambassador witnessed the demonstration, Sarah explained. "He knows the potential of this technology. If Blackwood wants to maintain plausible deniability, he can't risk an international or interplanetary incident." The aircraft landed in a meadow half a mile from the cabin, making no attempt at concealment. As they disembarked, Sarah addressed her team, 5 former special operators who had followed her into the most dangerous missions of their careers. "This isn't a combat operation," she instructed. "We're scientists retrieving research materials. Defensive posture only." She turned to Marcus. Stay close to me. The stabilization component will require your expertise once we locate it. They approached the cabin openly walking the same path Sarah had traveled countless times with her mother during childhood summers. The wilderness around them hummed with life birds, calling wind through pine trees, the distant sound of water against the lakeshore. It felt surreal to bring this conflict back to a place that had represented only peace and learning in Sarah's memory. As they crested the final rise, the cabin came into view, weathered cedar darkened by decades of Alaska's harsh seasons. Four figures in unmarked tactical gear stood on the porch, weapons visible but not raised. Behind them, through the cabin's front window, Sarah glimpsed General Blackwood himself standing beside the stone fireplace where Elena Hayes had once told stories of distant worlds. "Commander Hayes," called one of the tactical team, "General Blackwood requests a conversation." Sarah halted her group with a raised hand, maintaining 50 yards of separation. Interesting choice of location for a meeting considering this is private property. "National security concerns supersede property rights," the man replied mechanically. "I'm sure the intergalactic ambassador would find that perspective fascinating," Sarah countered, "especially regarding technology demonstrated under his official observation barely 12 hours ago." A moment of silence followed as her message was undoubtedly relayed to Blackwood inside. Then the cabin door opened and the general himself stepped onto the porch. "Commander Hayes," he called, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to obedience. "Let's discuss this situation like professionals." Sarah stepped forward alone, signaling her team to maintain their position. "My professional career ended when I refused an illegal order 5 years ago, General. Or have you revised that historical record too?" Blackwood's expression remained impassive. "Your mother was a brilliant scientist whose work had significant national security implications. The same appears true of your recent innovation." "My mother was murdered for refusing to weaponize her research," Sarah replied, her voice carrying across the clearing. "The same research you're attempting to seize now." The general's eyes narrowed slightly, the only indication her words had struck a nerve. "That's a serious accusation without evidence, Commander." "The evidence is inside that cabin," Sarah responded, "along with the final component that makes the technology viable long-term. A component my mother ensured would only work if used as she intended, for protection, not destruction." A tense silence fell across the clearing. Sarah could see the calculation in Blackwood's eyes, weighing options, assessing risks, considering the witnesses present and the potential political fallout of various scenarios. One representative from each side, the general finally proposed. Inside the cabin, unarmed discussion. Sarah knew it was potentially a trap, but also recognized Blackwood as a man who followed certain codes even in pursuit of questionable objectives. "Agreed, myself and Marcus. His expertise is necessary to verify the component." Blackwood nodded curtly. "Myself and Dr. Mira, who I believe you've met." For the first time, Sarah noticed the Proximan scientist emerging from the cabin, her opalescent skin subdued to pale blues and gray stress patterns, if Sarah remembered her xenobiology correctly. The four of them converged at the cabin porch, maintaining careful distance. Sarah felt the weight of history pressing down her mother's legacy, her own disgrace and redemption, the potential futures branching from this moment, all converging in this simple woodland structure. Inside the cabin remained much as Sarah remembered from childhood. Rustic furniture, bookshelves lined with both printed volumes and data crystals, the stone fireplace dominating one wall. But Blackwood's people had clearly been searching. Extensively, drawers stood open. Floorboards had been lifted, wall panels removed. "You won't find it through conventional searching," Sarah said, moving to the fireplace. "My mother was more creative than that." She knelt before the hearth, running her fingers along the stone facing until she found a particular rock with a distinctive pattern resembling a constellation. "She taught me that knowledge worth preserving should be hidden in plain sight, protected not by locks, but by understanding." Sarah pressed the stone in a specific pattern, 3 short, 2 long, like an old Morse code signal. A section of the hearth shifted slightly, revealing a small compartment containing a crystalline vial of iridescent liquid. "The stabilization catalyst," she explained, carefully removing the vial. "The final component that makes the molecular structure permanently stable rather than degrading over time." Sarah stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding caution. "May I?" she asked, extending her 6-fingered hand. Sarah passed the vial to Marcus instead. Analyze it. Confirm it's compatible with our current prototype. When the Arcturian produced a portable scanner examining the liquid's molecular structure. It's remarkable. He breathed, all four eyes widening. The catalyst creates a self-regenerating matrix at the molecular level. The blade wouldn't just remain stable, it would actually strengthen with use. Which is why it couldn't be weaponized, Sarah explained, looking directly at Blackwood. My mother designed it to respond to intention. Used for destruction, it self-destructs. Used for protection or creation, it self-reinforces. Dr. Mira's skin flickered with skepticism. That's scientifically impossible. Molecules can't detect intention. They can detect application patterns, Sarah countered. Certain vibrational frequencies occur only in destructive applications. The catalyst is programmed at the quantum level to destabilize when those frequencies persist. She turned back to Blackwood. That's why your weapons program failed 15 years ago. That's why you needed my mother's complete research. And why she had to be eliminated when she refused to cooperate, Marcus added quietly. Blackwood's expression hardened. You have no proof of such allegations. I have this, Sarah replied, removing a data crystal from her pocket. My mother's personal log detailing the threats she received, the pressure applied by your department, and her contingency plans if something happened to her. She met his gaze steadily. Copies have already been transmitted to secure locations, including the Intergalactic Embassy. The general's facade of calm finally cracked slightly. You're playing a dangerous game, Hayes. No game, Sarah replied. A simple choice. This technology has revolutionary potential for medicine construction, environmental remediation, all fields that benefit civilization. That was always my mother's intention. She paused, letting her words settle. You can continue pursuing it as a weapon, guaranteeing its failure and eventual public exposure of your program. Or you can support its development for its intended purposes under international and interspecies oversight. The cabin fell silent save for the distant call of birds outside. Sarah knew she was taking an enormous risk. Blackwood could simply order his team to eliminate everyone present and seize the research. But she also understood men like him, pragmatic above all, unwilling to risk their legacy on battles they calculated as unwinnable. The Intergalactic Defense Council would have significant interest in materials with these properties, Blackwood said, finally, his tone shifting to careful neutrality, particularly for protective applications. Sarah recognized the opening for what it was, not surrender, but strategic repositioning. I'm sure arrangements could be made for legitimate defense applications under appropriate ethical oversight. The negotiation that followed was tense but productive, a framework established for the technology's development under international and interspecies control with Sarah, retaining primary research authority. By sunset, an uneasy truce had formed, papers had been signed, and Blackwood's team had withdrawn to a respectful distance. As twilight painted Lake Clark in deepening purples and blues, Sarah stood on the cabin porch with Marcus and Graves watching the military transport depart. You think he'll honor the agreement? Marcus asked, his four eyes blinking in contemplative sequence. Blackwood's a pragmatist, Sarah replied. He recognized the technology would never work as a weapon and salvaged what advantage he could. She held up the crystalline vial containing the stabilization catalyst. Besides, my mother's safeguards remain. Some things can't be corrupted, no matter how much power is applied. She uncapped the vial and carefully applied a single drop to the bone blade. The obsidian material seemed to drink in the catalyst, its surface rippling momentarily before settling into a deeper, more stable darkness. The degradation halted, then reversed, molecular bonds strengthening, realigning, becoming something greater than their individual components. It's beautiful, Marcus whispered, his scanner displaying the transforming molecular structure. The pattern reminds me of neural networks adapting learning, growing stronger through connection rather than isolation. Sarah nodded, feeling a profound sense of completion. That was my mother's fundamental insight. True strength comes from cooperation, not domination. From respecting the inherent properties of materials, rather than forcing them into unnatural configurations. As darkness fell fully over the Alaskan wilderness, Sarah Hayes felt the converging threads of her life, soldier and scientist, daughter, and innovator, finally weaving into a coherent whole. Her mother's work was complete, her legacy secured not as a weapon of destruction, but as a tool for healing and protection. The path ahead remained complicated negotiations with the Defense Council, establishing research protocols, ensuring the technology remained true to its intended purpose. But for the first time in 15 years since a young Navy SEAL had received news of her mother's accident, Sarah felt the weight of unfinished business lifting from her shoulders. 1 year later, Sarah Hayes stood before a class of attentive students in the newly established Hayes Center for Biomimetic Studies at the Intergalactic Engineering Academy's Alaska campus. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating the teaching space where representatives from a dozen worlds gathered to learn the principles her mother had pioneered and she had perfected. The fundamental misconception in conventional material science, she explained, moving among the workstations with practiced ease, is the belief that superior function requires domination of natural properties. Indigenous knowledge across multiple worlds demonstrates an alternative approach, partnership with materials, understanding their inherent characteristics and working in concert with them rather than against them. At the back of the classroom, Marcus managed the holographic displays showcasing molecular structures from various worlds. His blue skin had darkened with maturity over the tumultuous year since their escape, his four eyes now carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had faced genuine danger and emerged stronger. Sarah lifted a teaching sample, a small blade of obsidian black material, fully stabilized with her mother's catalyst. This represents not an endpoint, but a beginning. The same principles that allow this material to interact with molecular structures with unprecedented precision can be applied across disciplines, from surgical instruments that separate tissue without trauma to environmental remediation systems that extract pollutants without chemical residue. She didn't mention the complex negotiations that had transformed her from fugitive to department head, or the oversight committee that included representatives from 7 worlds ensuring the technology remained true to its peaceful applications. The official records showed only that a classified military research program had been redesignated for civilian development under international supervision. Dr. Marmira had been reassigned to a research station in the Proxima system, her ambitions curtailed, if not entirely eliminated. Professor Vex surprisingly had revealed himself as an ally in the final negotiations, admitting his own ethical concerns about Project Shadowbone and providing crucial scientific validation for Sarah's approach. As for Darian, the ambitious Centaurian student had faced academic discipline for his attempted sabotage, his military connections insufficient to shield him from consequences. Last Sarah heard, he was serving on a remote terraforming project, a humbling assignment that might with time teach him the difference between exploitation and stewardship. General Blackwood remained a complex figure in the new research framework, officially supportive of the Hayes Center's peaceful mission, while undoubtedly continuing to explore military applications where possible. But the fundamental safeguards Elena Hayes had built into the technology ensured it would never become the weapon he had initially sought. Some principles Sarah had learned transcended even the most determined efforts to corrupt them. Today will begin practical application. Sarah continued, bringing her focus back to the present. Each of you has been provided with biological samples from your homeworld. We'll analyze their structural properties and identify potential applications based on the Hayes methodology. As the students began their work, Sarah moved to the window, gazing out at the pristine waters of Lake Clark stretching toward the horizon. Here, where her mother had first taught her to listen to the natural world, she was continuing a legacy that bridged worlds and generations. A soft chime from her personal communicator drew her attention. The message was from grave, simple, and direct, as always. Package secured. Blackwood's shadow program officially terminated. All files transferred to Oversight Committee. Elena would be proud. Sarah smiled slightly, tucking the communicator away. Another piece of justice, another thread in the tapestry of redemption, being woven day by day. Professor Hayes, a young Solarian student, approached her crystalline exoskeleton, refracting the sunlight into rainbow patterns. I've identified a resonant frequency in my homeworld's coral analogs that might enhance neural regeneration techniques. Sarah turned from the window, studying the student's findings with genuine interest. Excellent observation. This could have significant applications for spinal injuries across multiple species. As she guided the student through further analysis, Sarah felt a deep sense of rightness. The warrior and the scientist, the daughter and the teacher, all aspects of herself now working in harmony toward a purpose that honored both her mother's legacy and her own hard-won wisdom. Outside the classroom, the galaxy continued its complex dance of politics and power, where forces like Blackwood would always seek advantage through domination. But here in this space dedicated to knowledge shared rather than hoarded to healing rather than harm, Sarah Hayes had found her true mission, not forging weapons, but building bridges between worlds through the ancient wisdom her mother had recognized and the future potential she herself would help realize. The bone blade had begun as a symbol of defiance against those who would weaponize knowledge. It had become instead a key unlocking doors to understanding that would benefit generations across countless worlds, the true legacy of a mother's wisdom and a daughter's courage intertwined and unbreakable as the molecular bonds they had learned to respect rather than sever. In the end, that was a victory more meaningful than any battle won, a legacy worthy of both the scientist who had envisioned it and the soldier who had fought to preserve it. And as Sarah looked out at the eager students from a dozen worlds, she knew that this legacy would continue to grow and evolve long after she was gone, not through domination, but through the same principles of cooperation and respect that had made it possible in the first place.